Mr
Speaker, instead of taking substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to an immediate ceasefire and long-term sustainable peace, the Israeli government has ignored us. They've failed to let aid go through and created a man-made famine. It appears to me that the only people that the Israeli government will listen to is Donald Trump and the United States. So can the Foreign Secretary please confirm what discussions he has had with Donald Trump to take action against the Israeli government?
As I've said, that I have spoken to Secretary of State Rubio, Envoy Steve Witkoff and Vice President Vance about these issues. I leave discussions with the President of the United States to our great Prime Minister.
Anne Davies.
Deputy Speaker, data from the Israeli military shows that 83% of people killed in Gaza since October 23 have been civilians. Killing at this mass scale for months on end is unparalleled in modern conflict. So will the Foreign Secretary act to place far more pressure on Israel to end the mass killing of civilians by suspending the UK's current trade agreement with Israel and sanctioning those responsible for breaching international law?
Well, over 63,000 people have now lost their lives and well over 100,000 are injured as a result of this war. So she's right to put that front and centre, and she will recognise that we made a decision about suspending any negotiations for a new trade agreement a few weeks ago.
Dr. Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Professor Oz Salzberger describes a battle for the soul of Israel in the Financial Times of yesterday. There are thousands and thousands of moderate voices in Israel crying out for an end to this terrible war. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis march for peace. What can our government do to support these people?
Well, I'm hugely grateful to the honourable gentleman for bringing to mind the many Israelis marching, the many Israelis expressing deep concern for the plight of the hostages. And I certainly have both Israeli and Jewish friends hugely concerned about the direction that the Netanyahu government is taking this war and this further military operation into Gaza City, which will inevitably lead to more loss of life.
Martin Wrigley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The United Nations described the famine in Gaza as a deliberate collapse of the systems needed for human survival, a man-made disaster, a moral indictment and a failure of humanity itself. Every day my constituents ask me, what more would it take for the government to recognise this as genocide? What would the Foreign Secretary have me say to them?
Well, I'd refer to the remarks that I've made before at this dispatch box. I recognise what is being said. I recognise the work of international scholars particularly, and the fine judgments that must be made by the ICC and the ICJ. But we have an important democratic principle that these decisions must be made by lawyers, and it's for governments to act in the way that I have set out today.
Debbie Abrahams.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for his statement today, but also for the extensive work that he and his team and his officials have done to secure the international coalition of allies in the recognition of the state of Palestine, although this has been very much undermined by the Israeli cabinet and what they are proposing around the E1 annexation plan. Is there more that we can do to extend this coalition and increase the level of sanctions to stop the Israeli behaviour like this? And is it appropriate also to transfer, as they did in 1988, the UNGA meeting from New York to Geneva so that the Palestinian delegation can attend?
Well, I do think we need further dialogue on the issue of Palestinian attendance at that meeting, and I do recognise that these decisions were made previously and held in Geneva, but I hope that we can have some reconsideration and that we can afford the delegation the same privileges that they've had for many years.
Caroline Bowden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have a UN-declared man-made famine, children and babies being starved to death, journalists murdered, and now the world's leading genocide scholars state that Israel's actions meet the legal definition of genocide. It's clear that painstaking, careful international diplomacy is not working fast enough and the Gazans are running out of time. So isn't it time for us now to lead our allies in actions that Israel might take notice of? Sweeping trade sanctions, sanctions on Netanyahu and his entire cabinet, and a commitment that we will recognise Gaza at the UN with no conditions.
Well, the whole House will have heard what she said, and she will have heard what I've said on a previous situation, and I'd ask her to look closely at what this government has been doing, our leadership globally relative to other near partners. And I think the decision that we made a few weeks ago and the provisions that we set for how we would recognise and the judgments that we'll make as we head to UNGA are particularly important.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Foreign Secretary very much for the